Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen for Lawn Fawn, and today I'm going to be creating an ink blended sky using my distress inks. To start off with, I'm going to use the stitched rainbow die, and I'm going to die cut the base color out of white cardstock, and then I have a variety of colors from the textured cardstock packs. These have a great variety of colors in them, and I thought would make a really pretty rainbow. I'm going to use my glue tube to add some liquid glue to the back of each of the bands and add them onto that base that I created. I love having this base because this gives me the freedom to work with my rainbow and add it anywhere onto the card that I want. So as I'm attaching these, I'm just making sure to butt them up right next to each other so I don't have any white space showing in between. I did change up the rainbow a little bit by adding that kind of dark pink and light pink instead of having a purple, but I think it's a really pretty color combination. Now I'm going to start working on my ink blended background. So I wanted to have a really dark sky to this, just something a little different other than the soft, subtle backgrounds that I would normally create with a rainbow. And for this, I'm going to use the Distress inks. Distress inks are a lot more vibrant than the oxides, but they're also a little harder to blend. So I'm starting with salvaged patina on 80-pound white cardstock, and this is going to take me a little while to build up. So I'm just going across that bottom portion of the card with the salvaged patina. I came in with Salty Ocean, and then I'm at the top here with a blueprint sketch, and I'm going pretty light-handed. I work back and forth in those light circular motions, and I'm going to top off the blueprint sketch with seedless preserves to really deepen up the top part of the card. Then I'm going to go back over all of those colors to help kind of smooth out that transition. I'm going to finish this off by coming back in with that salvaged patina, and then that's going to finish off the background. So it's a really nice, vibrant, dark blue sky. I want to add some stars to my background, and to do this, I have this Copic white ink. Quite honestly, I'm not really sure where I got it, found it in my drawer. So I added a little bit to my work surface. I'm going to take a drop of water, and then I'm going to mix those two together with my paintbrush and splatter that all over the front of my card, and then set that off on the side to dry. Now I'm going to work on the Copic coloring portion of the card. So for this, I stamped the images from Snow Much Fun, Den Sweet Den, and How You Bean Star add-on. And I also have some paint buckets there from the Easter before and after, I believe it was. I don't end up using the paint buckets, but I stamped them out as it was kind of an idea I had, and I'd rather have them available versus having to go back and stamp and color them later. So all of the images are stamped on 80-pound white cardstock in the Lawn Fawn jet black ink, and then I'm coming in with my Copic markers. So for the bears, I'm using E59, 55, 53, 51, and then for the muzzle, I'm using E41. I will typically pick one side of the bear to add my darkest color to, but for this little guy that's jumping up and down, I decided to put the darkest colors on the outside of him. So the highlight area is going to be down the center of the bear. And I really love this jumping bear because I like making his belly kind of roundish looking. I think he's just adorable. I really had debated about coloring these bears in more of the Care Bear theme and just making them all different colors. But considering I had a really dark background, I wanted them to kind of stand out a little bit more. And I think by coloring them in a variety of colors might have gotten a little lost with my background. I had also contemplated the idea of making it look like they were painting a rainbow in the sky, but in the end, I opted for having them making it look like they're hanging stars in the sky, which either idea would have really looked adorable. So after I finish blending out my colors for this little sleeping bear, I'm going to use any one of the browns. I think it's the E59 to just color in the paintbrush. They're really small images, so I'm not going to do any shading to them. I chose the E55 to add as the actual color of the brush. And then I'm bringing in N4 and N2 to do the paint buckets. And I'm going to color the paint buckets to match a paintbrush. So I just grabbed a variety of colors, whether it's the pink, blue, and yellow. And then I'm going to color my stars. I always like to work in odd numbers, which is why I only stamped 3 stars. So for that, I have Y38, Y35, and Y32. I just chose one side of the star to make the darkest shade and then blend it out to the other side with my lightest. And then I'm going to use the coordinating dies to die cut out all of my images, but I seem to have lost the die that goes with this one little bear that's kind of facing to the right. So I need to fussy cut that and really dig through my stash to try and find my die. But to do fussy cutting, I move the paper in my hand, not my scissors. And even though I'm not a real big fan of fussy cutting, I will do it when needed, and I really loved that little bear, so I had to fussy cut him out. Continuing on with my scene, I die cut out some clouds using the puffy cloud border, and I'm taking a two-way glue pen and I just added that glue to the very top of the cloud, and then I'm sprinkling on some Prisma glitter, and I'm going to tap off any of the excess. This is going to add just some really pretty sparkle to the top of my clouds. I'm going to repeat that on my other cloud border, and I made sure that these were going to layer on top of each other but not overlap too much. And then once I tap off the excess on this cloud, I'm going to set them off on the side to dry and work on my sentiment on my background. I chose a sentiment off the How You Bean star add-on, and I'm lining them up using my MISTI rulers. I love using these to help make sure that everything is really straight, and I have them kind of staggered off on the side. So I picked those up at the door of the MISTI, removed my rulers, but I did a lot of ink blending on this background. So to check if my cardstock is ready, I'm just sprinkling on the white embossing powder. That embossing powder stuck to my background, which means that my background is still wet. So I wiped off that powder and sped up that drying process with my heat tool. I'm going to test this again to make sure it's ready. So I prepped it with my anti-static powder tool, sprinkled on that embossing powder, and it fell right off the cardstock, so I know my cardstock is ready. I once again prepped it with that anti-static powder, and now I'm inking up my sentiment in the Yeti ink, which is a white pigment ink. I'm going to stamp it twice just to make sure I have a clean impression. And then I can bring in that white embossing powder, sprinkle it over that, tap off my excess, and melt the embossing powder with my heat tool. Before I start adhering anything to my background, I'm going to go ahead and attach this to a card base. So I created a top folding card base that I just helped reinforce that fold with my bone folder, and then I'm adding my background on top of that. Now I can start working on the actual assembly of my card. So I brought in those puffy clouds. I just laid them over the top there. I haven't attached them down yet. And I added tape runner behind my rainbow and placed that behind the clouds. I adhered one of my bears to the stars right away with liquid glue, and then I added some thin foam squares to the top of that and added that on top of my rainbow, so it looks like he's hanging this star in the sky from the top of the rainbow. I'm going to also add some thin foam squares behind the other star that I'm going to place over by my sentiment, and I added those thin foam squares to the back of the cloud panel I'm going to add furthest in the back. So a lot of this is using the thin foam squares. There are two different thicknesses to foam squares, which I like because these foam squares, they add a little bit of dimension, but not so much that it's going to kind of make my card too thick in an envelope. So I'm just finishing up adding a couple of my bears. The one I'm going to have jumping kind of off on the side, and the other one is sleeping down below in the clouds. But I needed to add some shadow to them. They stood out a little bit too much. So I brought in a light gray marker and I'm just coloring that kind of underneath that sleeping bear. I also added some shadow to the one that's hanging a star at the bottom and then to this jumping bear too. So that way they're not just kind of floating in space. They have a little bit of a shadow to them. For a little added detail, I'm taking my white Jelly Roll pen and I'm just adding some highlight areas to the back side of the bears, and I'm also adding some little white dots to the stars. I tried to do that with a darker yellow marker, but it didn't stand out as much. So adding the white to the stars just really helps. Now, another fun thing you can do with your white Jelly Roll pen is if you didn't really get some good splatters from the Copic white earlier, you can add little dots to your background to create some small mini stars. So that is going to finish up my card project for you today. I really love that dark ink blended sky in the background along with the bright rainbow in the front. And these bears are just too cute for the front of the card. Here is a quick close up of that Prisma glitter on the top of the clouds, which adds just a lot of sparkle and shine. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again soon.